Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the fourth session of the third IRENA Innovation Week. This has become a major biennial event for IRENA, and this year the focus is on the use of renewables in energy, in industry and transport. My name is Martina Lyons, and I'm from the International Renewable Energy Agency, and it is my pleasure to be your host and walk you through today's session. In a moment, I will give an overview of the session. But first, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Dolf Gielen, IRENA's Innovation and Technology Center Director, to give his welcoming remarks. Dolf, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Martina, and welcome everyone to this session. Thank you for joining this third IRENA Innovation Week. This one is different from previous two Innovation Weeks because it's online due to circumstances. The previous Innovation Week in 2018 focused on power systems flexibility, the integration of solar and wind, and this time we will focus on end-use sectors and sector coupling. The world is facing an energy transition. Indicators are everywhere, from new wind turbines to new solar panels, electric cars, and low oil prices. However, we need to accelerate the energy transition 4- to 5-fold if we want to stay within the Paris climate objectives, and more countries are subscribing to the ambitious goal of decarbonization by 2050 or 2060. And while the objective is clear, the path to get there is not so clear, especially in how to decarbonize sectors in transport and industry where technology innovation is key, and these sectors are at the core of our discussions this week. Sector coupling based on electrification and green hydrogen is a core part of discussions, but also use of biomass for energy and feedstocks. So that's why we have this bioeconomy session now. IRENA Innovation Week is part of a growing IRENA program of work focused on end-use sectors. This week's discussions build on inputs such as our annual Global Renewables Outlook, published in April, and our Reaching Zero with Renewables report launched on 21st September. Insights from the discussions this week will inform our further work, including the next edition of our Global Outlook, which is due in spring 21. We will also work with partners to ensure that those insights inform key climate discussions in preparations for COP26 in November 21. And IRENA Innovation Week will provide essential input for the global debate on 1.5 degrees scenarios and pathways. During the 6 sessions over these 4 days, we want to inspire and inform decision makers by showing what is possible. We want to showcase innovative solutions from around the world that can help deliver deep decarbonization in industry and transport. And we bring together innovative companies, researchers, and policymakers to explore what is being done and what we need to focus more effort on. If you want to join other sessions, you can register online. All sessions are open for participation, and you will receive the links and details. We want your inputs into this session. The dialogue is an essential part of this event. You can ask questions through the chat function, and time allowing, moderators will try to include these in the panel debates. But do also use the chat function to share your reactions to what you are hearing or insights from your own work. We'll capture all your feedback and utilize it in the next phase of analysis and engagement on this topic. I hope for a fruitful and engaging dialogue, and thank you for your attention. This concludes my opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Dolf. As next, we will hear the keynote remarks from His Excellency Arif Tasrif, who is the Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources of Indonesia. Due to technical difficulties, we were not able to play this pre-recorded speech during the high-level opening session yesterday. So please let us share his remarks with you today. And bear with us a little bit. Well, there were a couple of technical issues, but I still hope you got the message, which was encouraging and inspiring to hear that biofuels and biomass are a significant part of Indonesian efforts to decarbonize their transport industry. Let's move back to the session. As Dov mentioned, under normal circumstances, we would have met in person, as was the case in our previous IRENA Innovation Week editions in 2016 and 2018. But having a virtual event has its benefits too. We can connect from anywhere in the world, and in fact, we have over 2,000 registered attendees for the whole week of discussions who are coming from 146 different countries. And our speakers also come from many countries and continents and are ready to showcase their experiences and emerging innovative solutions that can fully unlock renewables potential in industry and transport sectors. On the supply side for the industry and transport transition, we heard yesterday about smart electrification and early today about green hydrogen and green synthetic fuels. And we will continue in that supply side part, and today we will focus on another aspect, which is bioenergy. IRENA is organizing this session in partnership with the FAO's Global Bioenergy Partnership, or GBEP, which is a voluntary-based forum that works towards consensus amongst governments, intergovernmental organizations, and other partners to advance bioenergy for sustainable development, climate change mitigation, and also food and energy security. The topic IRENA and GBEP brings to you today is highly relevant. As we heard today from Dolph, to hold temperature rise at no more than 1.5 degrees requires deep decarbonization in every sector and the use of every energy green fuel. And the aim of today is to showcase best practices and innovative approaches around the world to secure sustainable biomass and to turn it into valuable feedstocks for energy. The discussion will explore how these experiences can be replicated and further scaled up. But before I dive into the agenda for today, let me reiterate some of the housekeeping items mentioned by Dolph. All of you are muted, and you will remain so throughout the event. However, instead of chat, there is a Q&A section, which we would love you to use, and we invite you to pose questions to our panelists there. And please maybe mention which panel discussion or panelist your question relates to. We will be monitoring your questions throughout the event, and we will select a few. But due to time constraints, we apologize in advance if your question is not answered. However, we will use all questions to inform all our further discussions. You can also use the function to introduce yourself and to let us know where you tune in from. This is a public event. It is being recorded and live streamed, and the recording will be available on demand in a public domain. Please note, therefore, that Chatman houses do apply to these discussions. If I may ask everyone to mute themselves. And when it comes to the agenda for today, it is as follows. So Dolph Keelan from IRENA has already welcomed you all. Up next are Dr. Michela Morese, Executive Secretary from GBEP FAO, our partner organization, and then Toshimasa Masuyama, Bioenergy Analyst from IRENA, who will set the scene for the following panel discussions. And then 2 following panel discussions will follow. First one, we'll discuss ways to scale up biomass feedstock production for transport and industry. And then the next one, we'll look into innovative solutions for maximizing biomass value stream. And in the closing remarks, Dr. Paul Durand from IRENA will briefly recap and wrap up the session with key takeaways. So without any further ado, let's move right to the scene setting part, and it is my pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Michela Morese, Executive Secretary from GBEP FAO. Maria, please, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this introduction, and I would like to thank and welcome all participants. It's a pleasure for me to be here today to give this presentation in order to set the scene together with our IRENA colleague, and it has been a pleasure also to contribute to the organization of this event. I believe you can go ahead with the presentation. Thank you so much. So with this presentation, I will try to contextualize where are we talking about bioenergy in the context of bioeconomy? So let's start from where we are in terms of carbon emissions. So we all know that global carbon emissions continue to grow. I'm sure you're familiar with these kinds of graphs coming from the NOAA observatories. So in this case, for example, you can see the black line that represents the average of the deseasonalized curves of each of the 4 observatories there are in the US. And on the 30th of September, just a few days ago, the atmospheric concentration of CO2 reached 410.94 parts per million, which compared with the pre-industrial baseline that was 280. Next, please. Next one, please. Right. This means that a lot has to be done still in terms of decarbonization. And if we look at the total amount of carbon emissions as of today, we have mostly reached the CO2 emissions that would be the maximum allowed in order to get to the 1.5 degrees scenarios, which in terms of percentage, it's only 9% of the carbon budget left, which is more or less 10 years left at the current trend of emissions. Next, please. So this means, once again, that CO2 emissions and concentration are not going in the right direction. We have a long way from the 1.5 degrees objective. This means that an extra effort is needed in order to decarbonize the global economy. But despite we are all aware that this is happening, well, the normal trend is going in the opposite direction, because a lot of our energy sources throughout the world are coming not from renewable energies. So this means that we need to reverse the trend. We need to give more emphasis to renewables, including modern bioenergy. Next, please. Right, thank you so much, Martina. And of course, we all know, and Toshimasa will present into the details also of the IRENA scenarios. We all know that modern bioenergy is what we define the overlooked giant amongst renewables, because modern bioenergy can and is already playing a very important role. If you look at the left side of the screen, you see that in 2017, modern bioenergy was already responding with 50% to the total final energy consumption from renewable. And on the right side, you see in terms of sectors, where bioenergy was contributing. In terms of heat, you see a high percentage, then transportation, and then electricity. Next, please. Well, we all know that modern bioenergy presents excellent opportunities, but not without challenges. And the important thing is to look at the sustainability in terms of production and use of modern bioenergy with the view to take out the best of the opportunities while addressing the challenges. Next, please. And the Global Bioenergy Partnership has been doing this, working primarily on sustainability since its establishment. For those who are connected and who are not familiar with the Global Bioenergy Partnership, GBEP, in acronym, is an international initiative formed by about 80 members between partners and observers. And you see on the screen, on the slide, the governments, partners and observers, and the international organizations, the logos of the organizations that are part of the partnership. And we are working together since 2006 in order to promote bioenergy for sustainable development. Next, please. And one of the main priority of the partnership since the very beginning, as I said, was sustainability. And in 2011-2012, we have agreed among the 80 partners of the partnership a set of sustainability indicators that are applicable to all types of bioenergy. So these sustainability indicators that you see on the screen, only of course the titles, are subdivided in an equal manner under the 3 pillars of sustainable development: environmental, social, and economic. As we said, they can be applied to any type of bioenergy. And the reason why also the 24 indicators are equally divided under the 3 pillars of sustainable development is because sustainability can only be achieved if equal importance is given to the 3 pillars of sustainable development: environmental, social, and economic. And through the measurement of these indicators, policymakers could receive important information that could guide their policymaking. And measured over time, these indicators could further give information to policymakers in order to further adjust their policies in order to further facilitate a sustainable development of bioenergy. Next, please. So, of course, the GBEP indicators, together with the GBEP indicators that represent a voluntary tool, this tool could be used also to measure, notify, and verify the achievement of, for example, NDCs, nationally determined contributions, and SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And we have done a cross-check analysis assessment, and all the 24 GBEP indicators are strictly connected with all, directly or indirectly, with the 17 SDGs. Next, please. But it's also true that we cannot look at bioenergy in isolation. So we know that the overall demand of biomass is growing for different uses: food, feed, fuel, fiber, and biochemicals. As demand increases, so too do the pressures on the natural resources and on the ecosystem. We've seen the indicators, 8 of which are related to the environmental performances. Sustainable bioenergy has the potential to contribute to sustainable development, and we are still working in order to facilitate sustainable development through the best use of bioenergy. But we can only do this if we consider bioenergy as part of a broader bioeconomy. Next, please. And of course, this is to give an idea that we have to look at the various trade-offs and synergies between different demands on biomass to contribute to the overall sustainable bioeconomy. And integrating biomass conversion for multiple purposes using innovative approaches can have very important and synergistic effects, very positive effects, the whole bioeconomy context. Next, please. One specific aspect that I wanted also to mention in this context is also the indirect effect of COVID-19 to the bioenergy and bioeconomy sector. We have realized through the pandemic period that the decarbonization of transport and industry sector is becoming more and more important and needed. On one side, we've gotten used to cities without traffic and without too many cars on the road. On the other side, we have seen, and this is to share the example of Italy, for example. The north of Italy is the industrial part of the country, where it's more polluted with respect to the rest of the country, and where the highest incidence of COVID-19 cases was registered because of pollution. So this means that COVID-19 is also giving us an important message in terms of how important it is to decarbonize the transport and industry sectors. And for those who haven't seen a recent interview by the UN Secretary General, he strongly and very clearly stated that the reboot after the COVID-19 has to be green. This means that the business as usual scenario is not valid anymore. That sustainable bioenergy is and has to be part of the solution. Next, please. And of course, it's our effort to go ahead in order to make sure that bioenergy has a role to play. We all recognize that bioenergy has a role to play. And we all recognize that bioenergy offers many opportunities to decarbonize the global economy. Sustainability is key. I've mentioned the importance of sustainability, and the importance of monitoring sustainability is a necessary step. On the other side, sustainability has to be a tool, a means to facilitate the sustainable development and the decarbonization of sectors as well through clear and stable policies. So the more we could give policymakers guidance in terms of policies and actions where they could intervene in order to further facilitate a sustainable development and deployment of bioenergy, the better it is in order to decarbonize the sector, and the better it is also to stimulate investments, private sector with their investments, and also at the same time also contribute to change people's perception, because there is the tendency to demonize the bioenergy sector, while it could be, and we are all aware, it could be done in a sustainable manner, contributing to sustainable development. And as I said, also bioenergy has to be considered into a broader context of bioeconomy. And the next two panels will be focused on two important aspects of innovative solutions. On one side, feedstock, and on the other side, the innovative solution to make the change happening. Next slide, please. So this is my concluding remarks, some food for thought for the next session, and I give back the floor to Martina for her follow-up. Thank you very much. You are muted, Martina.
Okay, I double-clicked. Sorry. Thank you, Michela, for a great overview of bioenergy as such, but also opportunities and all the challenges in this area. And next will be Toshimasa Masuyama, the IRENA's bioenergy analyst. Toshi, over to you.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you, Michela, for providing the comprehensive picture of sustainable bioenergy. So my role here is to set the scene. So please, next slide, please. So let me begin with this chart showing the total final energy consumption comparing 2017, 2050 PES, and 2050 TES tests by end-use sectors based on the Global Renewables Outlook report. TES is Plan Energy Scenario, which is based on current energy plans already in place, including MDCs. And TES is Transforming Energy Scenario, which is the ambitious yet realistic pathway to meet the Paris climate goals. If you take a look at the energy mix in TES, you can see two dominant colors. Orange is renewable electricity, and green is bioenergy. So in a nutshell, renewable electricity and bioenergy are the two major drivers for energy transformation. So we need to explore the complementary roles of electricity and bioenergy if we are to move away from fossil fuels. So when it comes to industry, bioenergy accounts for 7% of the sector's energy demand in 2017, but this is mostly used by food processing industries like sugar mills, rice mills, and also wood processing industries like wood processing industries, wood sawmills, and pulp and paper factories. But these are low-hanging fruits, I would say, because they have abundant biomass feedstock at hand. But as discussed in the previous sessions, we need to think about how hard-to-abate sectors like iron and steel, cement, and petrochemicals can be decarbonized. So bioenergy may need to play an expanded role beyond food and wood industries, potentially providing up to 20% of the sector's energy demand. In transport, biofuels provide 3% of the sector's energy demand in 2017, but in the longer term, transport will become much more electrified. But not everywhere, not in all sectors, and not all at once. Please take 2 decades to turn over, and EVs can only enter markets with well-developed power grids and charging infrastructure, and ships and freight trucks and airplanes are unlikely to be fully electrified. So it follows that there will be a large need for biofuels for several decades to come. The test scenario foresees 5-fold increase of liquid biofuels, providing 20% of the sector's energy demand. And in the building sector, a huge volume of biomass is being used mainly for cooking in a traditional manner. So this is a major cause of forest degradation and indoor air pollution in developing countries. So these practices must be phased out as early as possible. So another point to which I would like to draw your attention is a huge gap between test and test in terms of bioenergy deployment. This means that we need to raise ambitions of bioenergy policies using innovative technologies, innovative business models, or innovative policy frameworks. So next slide, please. And as discussed, the hard-to-abate sectors has a large share of GHG emissions. And while technical and institutional challenges remain, biomass could be used as an alternative for fossil-based feedstock and as a fuel to produce low, medium, and high temperature processed heat in these challenging sectors. So waste and residues can be used more widely, for example, in cement kilns. And biochemicals, including bioplastics, are gaining more attention globally. And the uptake of biojet is still marginal, but biojet is considered as the most promising pathway for sustainable aviation fuels. And next slide, please. Overall, to keep the test scenario on track, the primary bioenergy supply needs to be more than 4 times larger in 2050 compared to 2017. So this poses several challenges, of course, but many literature suggests that the world has potential to supply bioenergy to that level in a sustainable fashion without interfering with the food production by using residues, waste products, or byproducts, most of which are simply disposed or just burned or just overlooked. So next slide, please. Key considerations for this session. First, a drastic expansion of biomass feedstock supply is required. But how? Some people say feedstock availability is not a major issue, but such statement is based on business as usual thinking. So we need to change our strategies. We need to find a way to scale up biomass feedstock production, including for hard-to-abate sectors. And startups and business expansion will be indispensable for the expanded uptake of bioenergy in end-use applications. So we need more players. But in order to attract more business players, enabling environment for investment in bioenergy must be created. And also reputational risks must be addressed in order to provide more confidence for potential investors and off-takers. And as opposed to advanced biofuels for transport, bioenergy applications in industry have gained less attention so far. So we need to find optimal distribution of biomass for different applications, not only for energy, but also for materials or chemicals. And last but not least, sustainability governance needs to be put in place. But I'd like to point out that the benefits of bioenergy use go beyond emission reduction. But rather, bioenergy use can be incentivized by other political goals, such as rural development, job creation, post-harvest management, land restoration, or better forest management, or better waste management, and so forth. So in my view, bioenergy is very much unique in that it can provide several external benefits. And therefore, the real benefits of bioenergy may not be fully visible or may be underestimated if we look at bioenergy only through the lens of energy spectrum. So today we have several distinguished speakers ready to discuss in more detail. So we have two panels, as it is already explained. So stay tuned. With this, I'd like to thank you for your kind attention. And this concludes my scene-setting remarks.
Thank you very much, Toshi. That was very insightful. And thank you also, Michaela, for both of you for setting the scene for our upcoming discussion and for sharing the role of bioenergy in general in the energy transition. So thank you. And now let's move directly to the first panel discussion. It is my pleasure to introduce you to the moderator of this first panel discussion, Dr. Gerard Ostheimer, the Chief Sustainability Officer of the Global Biofuels Solution. But before I hand it over to Gerard, please don't forget to use Q&A feature to ask questions to our speakers. And now, Gerard, over to you.
Hello, everyone. This is Gerard Ostheimer. Should I be showing my video or no? I'll take that as a no. It is a pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you to Michaela and Toshi and Dolph for setting the scene. Today, we are joined by 4 outstanding speakers who are going to talk to us about the upstream aspects of biomass production: Dr. Rainer Janssen, Dr. Fosiso Sola, Dr. Carolina Grassi, and Keith Klein. All 4 of these speakers, as you'll see, are experts in their particular areas dealing with land use, creative solutions to biomass production, and to sustainability.
Gerard, sorry to interrupt you yet.
Yes, please.
All speakers to turn off their cameras. I cannot unmute it myself. Apologies.
So you want me to turn on my camera?
Yes, yes.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And so I think that both Toshi and Michaela did a very nice job of setting up our conversation. And so without further delay, if Rainer, Dr. Janssen, if you are ready, then I think that we can go ahead and start with your presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gary, for the kind introduction. And many thanks also for IRENA and the GBEP FAO for giving me the opportunity to say a few words to you this the evening in my case. So greetings from Munich. My brief intervention will actually address the theme of the production of sustainable biomass on so-called MUC, marginal, underutilized, and contaminated lands, with a focus of Europe in this case. Myself, I'm Managing Director of the Projects Department of WEEKU, Renewable Energies, a consultancy based in Munich. I've been active in the European and Global Bioenergy projects since 20 years. I will, obviously, the focus on these MUC lands is in order to avoid the already mentioned food feed fuel conflict. So these lands are basically perceived to be not suitable for food and also feed production. So therefore, specifically suited for bioenergy production. I will today present to you results and ongoing activities of two projects funded by the European Commission in the framework of the Horizon 2020 program, namely the projects ForBio and BioPlus-EU. And I would like to acknowledge the contributions of my colleagues Cosette Kharaja, Rita Merza, and Dominique Nutz, as well as the number of international projects involved in both these European projects. Next slide, please. I will start with the project ForBio. The website is indicated, as you can see. The project title is Fostering Sustainable Feedstock Production for Advanced Biofuels. So the transport sector was the focus of this project on underutilized land in Europe. This project is completed, so you will find all the results on the mentioned website. Thank you. I would, as I mentioned before, there is more than 10 partners involved in the project. I don't have time to mention all of those, but you will find them on the website. I would just like to acknowledge the contribution of the FAO as one of the sort of core developer of this project idea and concept, and also of the partner responsible of all the sustainability aspects. The basic idea of this project was to focus on three specific case studies and perform feasibility studies on the agronomics and on the techno-economic potential in these three case studies. Located in Italy, Ukraine, and Germany, I have provided some information on the case studies. You will find that these case studies, they have a different focus. So the one in Italy was a case study in the south of Sardinia, which was also was looking at contaminated land from industrial activities. More than 20,000 hectares were investigated. And the reasons for selecting this case study was also that this region is lagging behind development, so it was meant to bring employment effects into the region. The case study 2 focused on Ukraine, an area north of Kiev, and it was focusing on underutilized marginal agricultural lands. As you all know, Ukraine is extremely well suited for agricultural production, but doesn't quite, like, not all the land there is used. For those both case studies, the aim was the production of lignocellulosic ethanol, and one of our partners was actually a potential off-taker of the biomass for the production of lignocellulosic ethanol. In Ukraine, there was a number of feedstocks investigated for all, a number of species investigated for all case studies. In Ukraine, it was mainly willow as the best option. In Italy, it was Arundodonax. The third case study in Germany focused on an area south of Berlin in the state of Brandenburg. and looked at the reclamation of former lignite mines. You can see on the slide that the actual areas are smaller and scattered, so not suitable for large-scale ethanol production. Therefore, we focused on use in biogas plants or in future grass-based biorefineries. There was a lot of work, like you find all these feasibility studies on the website, please have a look. A lot of effort were put in the assessment of environmental, social, and economic sustainability. As I mentioned, the work was led by FAO and was based on the GBEP Sustainability Indicators, kindly introduced by Michaela a few minutes ago. So that was basically the starting point. And in this project, we had activities to train farmers in order to move towards the establishment of the value chains. We had events building capacity, so a number of activities to promote such kind of land use in these areas. Just quickly on the barriers, you find the bullet economic and non-economic barriers. The main barrier, of course, was economic. It's always like currently the production on such kind of lands of sustainable biomass is, I would say, quite a bit too expensive. So we would need to think about additional options to sponsor such kind of production, especially looking at kind of reclamation effects of these lands, or for instance, phytoremediation of land, of contaminated lands. These additional benefits would need to be monetized. The next slide, please. So you will find that this project is still ongoing. It's about has passed its first year of 3 years, and based also on results of the previous 4Bio project, we thought in a similar partnership again, it would be very good to have a more detailed look on the actual availability of such kind of NDC lands in Europe. So the aim of this project is to start basically with an assessment of such lands all over Europe using high-resolution data and the GIS systems, so satellite data. This will be basically a core of this to be developed platform. The platform will also integrate a public user-friendly tool to assess all 3 aspects of sustainability. Again, this initiative is led by the FAO and is based on results developed in the previous 4Bio project. I need to mention that the GIS work is coordinated and led by the partner Joanneum Research, and the actual platform development that will include all this wealth of data collected and the sustainability aspect is developed by UCLM from Spain. So actually, most of the work of this project is placed into a detailed analysis of available lands in Europe. I will show you some preliminary glimpse later. And then based on these results, so we basically return the approach around with respect to the 4Bio project. So based on the data developed, we will then get in contact with stakeholders. We will involve local and regional authorities. We have financial experts involved in the partnership in order to move towards bankable value chains for sustainable biomass production on these lands. Next and last slide, please. So as I was saying, the BioPlat.eu project activities are still ongoing. So you will be able to find general information on the website that is also indicated here in green. You will not find all the information on the maps and on the platform yet. This will take another few months. What you can see on the right-hand side, though, is the first results on underutilized in red and contaminated lands in blue in Europe. You can look at this in 2 sides. First of all, let's say most of the map is neither red nor blue. So also these lands, of course, are limited. However, it is quite, put it in simple terms, quite a significant potential of lands in this case, as you can see, especially in Spain and northern Italy. The actual identification of such contaminated underutilized lands follows stringent criteria that are also being published. So it's, for instance, for common contaminated lands, we use European thresholds of contamination by heavy metals, other issues. So in case available, we take the national threshold data to identify such contaminated lands. And the left-hand side of this slide basically shows a glimpse on the hopefully user-friendly web-based platform as it is currently being developed and as it would look like in the future. Currently, you see there is still a yellow work to do sticker on the map. So this website is not yet freely available. Yes, that was my hopefully about 5 minutes to shed some light on current activities on the use of NDC lands. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm available for further questions later. Thank you.
Thanks, Rainer. I think I will ask you one quick question. You kind of went through it a little quickly, but did you say that for a lot of these lands that just producing biomass for bioenergy is insufficient to create an economically viable project? You would need some other sort of revenue from the land, and could that possibly be from, say, carbon farming?
I didn't understand your last words. Where should it come from, the additional?
I suggest, could it come from carbon farming or sequestration credits or something like that?
In the end, let's say these 3 case studies we investigated in the 4Bio project, of course, they have different results. As you can imagine, the biomass produced in Ukraine was a lot cheaper than that in the other 2 regions. So in fact, the costs for Ukrainian biomass would be feasible. Let's say value chains can be built upon that. So in Ukraine is more other barriers that are currently keeping the implementation. Especially in Italy and especially in Germany. In Germany, we did some calculations on use of biomass in biogas plants, and in the end, it was too expensive. So other revenues could include anything, including what you said, or if using contaminated land, then let's say some kind of ecosystem remuneration would need to be integrated. But then I need to put the caveat now, or because usually this is also a question. Let's say, of course, the effects of contaminants on the use in conversion technologies such as biogas needs to be further investigated. There are some studies, but we are not in a position now to say everything is solved. We can keep it.
Understood. Thank you very much, Rainer. And now we are joined by Dr. Sola, who will be describing, I think, some integrated forestry and agricultural techniques that are being developed in her region. So, Dr. Sola, please.
Good evening from Nairobi. You hear me?
We do. Very clear. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Pastor Sola, working at ICRAF and managing a project that is looking at facilitating more sustainable fuel value chains, which is being implemented in Kenya, Cameroon, DRC, and Zambia in collaboration with CIFO. And today I'd like to share with you our experiences in Kenya, where we are looking at managing invasive species. Next slide. So Prosopis juliflora is an invasive species that was reintroduced to Africa from South America, and in Kenya it was introduced around the 1970s through to the 80s, and for a good objective, for a good cause, at that time, these areas were really suffering from desertification. They were really threatened by lots of degradation, and the intervention with Prosopies was a more than welcome intervention. It arrested a lot of erosion. It reduced lots of wind, impacts of wind on people's homes and so on. But of late, it has taken over grazing lands, it's taking over agricultural land, it's pushing people from their homes. And as you can see, it's not just Kenya, it's actually a number of countries within Africa where it's invasive. In other countries, it's naturalized, not so invasive, but it's invasive in the region. And we are looking at how we can use this massive biomass to actually use it as feedstock for bioenergy. Right now, it's being used to produce charcoal, but what are the other opportunities that it can be used in cogeneration like it has been done in India? Next slide, please. So as you can see in the pictures there, that when it was introduced early, it was really to arrest that degradation. But by 2016, it had taken over a lot of land around the Baringo Lake. And this has been increasing at 2% in Kenya as a country, but it has been really aggressive in this particular county, which is called Baringo, where now we actually have about 18,000 hectares. And we believe in that area it's increasing at 4% per year, or around 640 hectares per year. And it has been used for charcoal. You can see all those charcoal bags there. Many organizations are trying to facilitate that we have legal, sustainable green charcoal on the market. But what are those opportunities that have been explored to use it as feedstock in cogeneration? Next slide, please. Yeah, so that is the Baringo landscape with the Prosopies invasion, a photo taken in 2016. Next slide. So what has happened in this area with this mass of biomass, there has been an attempt to actually start a venture to do cogeneration with Prosopies in 2000, and starting in 2013, where a multi-billion venture was put up and looking at to produce 8 to 12 megawatts of power within the 20 years. But this has not been really successful for some of the reasons that have been highlighted by Michaela at the beginning, in terms of the policy framework, in terms of the investment. So you can see that by 2017, the company actually stalled, all the operations were stopped. And the major issue, it had something to do with the kind of technology that was being used. So the gas that was produced actually was impure, and it could not be used to actually be used in the power generation. The gasification technology was not the most suitable, but also there were these tenurial issues that came in. The relationship with the community in managing this mass of biomass was really not well fine-tuned. Can you click twice for me, please? Yeah, so by 2018, there was a lot of public outcry, newspaper headlines, really looking at now this venture has failed, Prosopies is an enemy, it's devastating land, and all the hope is lost. And now the call is, can we eliminate this Prosopies? How do we move forward? All the strategies have been lost. Just recently, this year in April, another article was put out. Is Prosopies, is it a friend or foe? Next slide, please. Next slide again. So the future that we are looking at, we are saying that from our perspective at ECRAF, we have looked at lots of documentation, look at lots of attempts that have been made, and we are saying several research and knowledge gaps exist. There are lots of debates whether Prosopies should be eradicated, whether this biomass can be mobilized as an opportunity. There are conflicting views on the effectiveness of the technologies for controlling the aggressiveness of spread, but also the technologies for mobilizing this into bioenergy. There is a great opportunity here to devise some bioenergy ventures which can drastically reduce the impact on the encroachment, but also contribute to the generation of power, and that will uplift the livelihoods of the locals, but also contribute to the national economy. And of course, there is a caution. It is an aggressive invader, leading to socioeconomic impacts. People are losing their livestock, they are losing their limbs to thorns and so on. and it can have major ecological impacts as well. It changes the soil salinity. It is a fertilizer tree, but it actually changes, it competes out all the other plants, it competes grasses, it competes trees, so it reduces the biodiversity within the area. But we really feel that there is a way where we can actually strike a balance to have this mobilized as bioenergy. Can we turn around the outcry that is there in the public right now that foresees should be eradicated, but mobilize it, find the right technologies, find the right mechanisms of engaging partners and stakeholders to make this work, and also bring in other agroforestry practices that can be used, that are being used in the other countries to really promote the management of foresees as well as the control of encroachment. This will not benefit just the people of Baringo, Kenya, but really it's spreading aggressively in Somalia, in Sudan, and so on. And we think it should be mobilized to promote bioenergy ventures in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sola. If I could ask you one immediate question. So the power that was going to come from this plant that shut down, what was that power being used for?
Actually, they wanted to sell it to the grid.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. Something that I think is potentially interesting in situations like this is if there's a immediate demand for that power. Like this week we're worried about transportation and industry, and I just wonder if there was some industry that set up that could use this plant where you actually create a local demand as opposed to just a generic feed it into the grid system. But perhaps we'll get back to that. Did you want to comment on that, or did you have any thoughts on what would be the best use of this invasive plant in these communities?
Well, I think cogeneration would have been great because, I mean, in Africa right now, connectivity is still less than 50%. In some of these areas, connectivity is less than 10%. So really having the grid boosted in those areas, we are contributing not just to managing the ecosystem, you are contributing to education, you are contributing to health. So it will really have big impact. And also the small-scale industries that are depending on charcoal right now to power their services. So really, there is demand.
Oh, great. So so those small-scale industries, that's great. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Dr. Sola. We'll get back to you when we engage the rest of the audience on this. And now our next speaker is Dr. Grassi from Brazil. Carolina, please.
So thank you, Gerd. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here and discuss with these great experts about how we can scale up the biomass production in a sustainable way. So next slide, please. So I had a chance to work in different fields related to biomass production, things the research and innovation until the commercial production, and now I'm working RSC with sustainability aspects. So here today, I would like to go quickly in three main aspects that I consider very important when you need to produce biomass. The first one is the energy density. The second one is the reward for efficiency. And the third one, and more important for me, is the sustainable production. And here in this slide, regarding the energy density, I'd like to show you that it's possible to cultivate energy cane, a kind of cane 3 times more productive than a traditional sugar cane. For traditional sugar cane, we have 8 tons per hectare of biomass, while for energy cane, we have 250 tons per hectare, as you can see in the first picture. And besides that, this high productivity, energy cane can also tolerate dry seasons, dry environments, and can be cultivated in degraded lands. So one of the reasons that is probably related to this feature is the root density of energy cane, as you can see in the picture in the bottom. Energy cane, the root of energy cane can also be related to to carbon sequestration and soil protection, besides some interaction with microorganisms. And using energy cane, if you considering 1 hectare of sugar cane and energy cane, we can produce for first generation ethanol. Next, please. Could you click twice? The same amount of first generation ethanol and 3 times more second generation ethanol, considering the use of bagasse and leaves and tops. So here, my main message is that we can use innovation, science, and technology to create high productivity biomass. So please, the next one. And here I will ask you to click several times because please go ahead. I think two more times. Yes, okay, here. So, and here, what is the important message in the second point is how we can reward efficiency. And to illustrate it, I'd like to explain a little bit about the Brazilian biofuels policies that named Renewable Bio. Renewable Bio is a sophisticated program that incentivizes the biofuel production, considering the positive externalities of the biofuels as the avoidance of carbon emission and also the efficiency of the process. So the Renewable Bio is based in a life cycle analysis from well to wheel, considering the agricultural, industrial, and distribution phases. And based on that, we have the amount of biofuel emission. If you subtracted the biofuel emission from fossil fuel emission, we'll have a score. This score represents the emission of CO2 equivalent avoided by biofuels. This number is audited and certified and then multiplied by the amount of biofuels eligible. I mean that it's in compliance with environmental laws in Brazil that can be produced in a sustainable way. And based on that, this multiplication will result in the decarbonization credits, named CBio. 1 CBio is equal to 1 ton of CO2 equivalent avoided. And these CBios are commercialized in the stock exchanges and are related to Brazil NDCs. So what is important here? The more efficient is the process and more CO2 equivalent is avoided, more CBio can be issued. And I mean, the income of producer is higher. So the program is a smart way to increase the efficiency and the sustainable production of biofuels and consequently the biomass transformation in biofuels. So the next one, please. And here, for me, the most important part and how we can produce biomass in a sustainable way. I'm sure that we can produce biomass and use biomass as a base and a feedstock of bioeconomy in a transition for a low carbon economy, but it must be done in the right way with sustainability and respecting the planetary boundaries. Using biomass and cultivated biomass in the right way, we can capture great opportunities, we can capture carbon, and we can add value to the nature capital. And this is the mission of RSB, the Roundtable on Sustainable Biomaterial. RSB has a robust and certification system that is based on 12 principles and criteria that you can see here in this slide that cover economic, environmental, and social aspects of biomass production and the conversion of this biomass or other renewable carbon into biofuels and bioproducts. So using these principles and criteria and the certification systems, a company can ensure for civil society, for stakeholders, and for the market that the production is doing in the right way, in a sustainable way. Moreover, RSB has a unique system and a unique standard to certify the low indirect land use change risk. Using this model of certification, biomass producers can prove that they are increasing the yield, or they are producing in an unused and degraded land, or they are using waste and residues. And in this way, they avoid the land use change, or the indirect land use change. RSB has already certified an UPN company for the low ILUC risk. This is the first certification in the world. And using these principles and criteria of sustainability, RSB can work, for instance, assess the potential of producing biomass in different countries. We are doing it now in Brazil to understand the potential of Brazil to produce biomass for biofuels, considering these principles of sustainability. We have done the same thing for Sub-Saharan Africa in a partnership with WWF and Boeing, and all these results are available at WWF and RSB website. So I think this is my main messages, and I'll be happy to discuss further following in the next. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolina. If I could just keep you for a second. So obviously the Renova Bio and the CBIOS program is looking to drive the scale up. And Toshi made it clear that we need to achieve our climate goals, that we need to scale up bioenergy and biofuels 4 or 5 times, right? Do you see already any impact from the Renova Bio program in recruiting interest in expanding the fuel sector in Brazil? I know it's early days, but I was just wondering if you are aware of some projects that are coming online. And you're muted.
Sorry, we have we have a lot of interest already in Renewable Bio. More than 200 ethanol and biodiesel mills are already certified and working with Renewable Bio. Currently, we have more than 10 million CBIOS decarbonization credits already issued, that correspond to I think more than 65% of the goal that we have for this year in Brazil. And these CBIOS are already commercialized in the stock exchanges. So yes, we see a lot of companies and mills and biofuels producers investing in technology and innovation to improve their production and issue more CBIOS.
There's actually a few quick technical questions from the audience we could maybe get out of the way on energy cane. Are you okay with that before we go on to Keith?
Yeah, sure. If I can answer, I'll be happy to support.
All right. There's the one quick question is is there more or less water consumption by energy cane relative to standard sugar cane, or is it the same?
Yes, it's very similar related to the biomass. However, as we have more biomass, sometimes we need more water. But we have done a great experiment in a dry area and in Brazil with less water, and it's worked very well. And 3 years ago, when we have a dry season here in São Paulo, Brazil, and we have the two varieties cultivated side by side, what we see that energy cane can grow more than and be more robust than the traditional sugar cane. But We are still evaluating the use of water on energy cane. So I think we can have more details in the future.
Okay, well, another quick question, and then we might circle back to you later. But the other quick question is energy cane, is that a GMO? Is that a genetically modified plant?
No, it's not a GMO. It's a hybrid obtained from process between the two wild type seeds of cane, the Saccharum officinarum and Saccharum spontaneous. That's the same parents of traditional sugar cane. The difference here is how we choose and we look for the hybrids that we want. We can choose a hybrid that produces more sugar, that is the traditional sugar cane, or more biomass, that's the energy cane.
And maybe this is a complicated question, but for RSB, is there, for the certification as sustainable by RSB, is there any treatment of GMO, or is that not necessarily relevant to your criteria?
As you can see in the principle 11 in my slide, we treat a GMO inside of this principle. We understand we are neutral regarding GMO in RSP. We need to understand what is the positive and negative impact during our evaluation. But we don't have a kind of a position related to GMO. We are neutral, and we need just to evaluate it, depends case by case.
Very clear, Carolina. Thank you very much. And
thank you, Garrett.
Certainly. And so now we'll turn to Keith to give his perspective on sustainable biomass production, I assume in the southeastern part of the United States, or maybe more broadly. So Keith, if you will, thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. And it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, everyone. Good evening. My name is Keith Klein. We can jump to the next slide. I work at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And I guess in the field of bioenergy, I started working in Ecuador in 1980 with the National Energy Institute on renewable energy, mostly bio-based, biofuels, bioenergy for cookstoves and industry, as well as biogas. So it's been a while that I've been involved in this. Most of my career, I was helping the U.S. government implement what they call Section 118 and 119 of the Foreign Assistance Act, which we actually have a law that says our assistance overseas should protect biodiversity in tropical forests. Now, they don't put a lot of money behind that law, but they did put a person. And I was honored to be that person and work in about 20 countries around the world trying to implement that law. And I learned some things doing that over a couple of decades that I think are relevant for bioenergy. One of those things is that there's no reason biomass feedstock can't improve ecosystem services, protect and conserve biodiversity, especially selected species of concern, and food security. Biomass production should always do these things, but it has to be done, I think, some people might say done right, in order to achieve those goals. But there are examples of progress that have been made. We heard from Brazil, you know, the case of Brazil is interesting because all the sugar cane is grown there, and the development of bioenergy markets. I think there was an accelerated move to reduce burning, and burning fields often spreads into neighboring riparian areas, woodland areas, the forest reserves on farms. So controlling burning is a big deal anywhere in the world, including the United States. In the southeast United States, actually, right now we have a dry period and wildfire. But anyway, there's been a lot of progress, and there's a lot of opportunity for biomass production to be one tool, and this has been mentioned by Michaela and others as well. It's one tool to help us manage landscapes better and give some incentives for people to do the right thing. The first photo to the right of the text in this slide, for example, is a poorly managed typical forest in the southeast, actually right a few miles from where I live. And trees are falling over. It's going to be prone to bark beetle infestation and fire. And it takes some investment to manage that forest, but it could be managed to actually enhance habitat for some of our endangered species in the southeast. We have gopher tortoise and cockaded, red cockaded woodpeckers that are both listed, federally listed as species, for example, and they need more open, as the next photo shows down the slide, more open forests with less scrub material around the ground for those species to reproduce and survive. So we can manage these resources for biodiversity as well as other things. Now, I was asked to do 3 slides and cover 3 challenges. So the first challenge is how do we ensure that we're actually doing the right thing? Another challenge, and this might be the biggest challenge, is how do we build trust and public support for bioenergy? And I think it has to be from the bottom up. And it depends on relationships, and those, of course, are a little more difficult right now with COVID. But building trust and public support is critical. And we have promoted and tried to apply a process that involves stakeholders throughout each step, which we think could help. And this would also help kind of integrate the scientific input with the social input. We generally try to always use native species, for example, to avoid some of the problems you can get with introduced species in any landscape, and address local priorities. So that's but that's another challenge that we face is building public support. And we've done a lot of publications on that issue, as you can see. Next slide, please. And finally, the third challenge, I think, is how do we create markets for biomass? We have, as I call here, we have biomass to burn. I have a little arrow in this slide pointing from a map of northern Guatemala. That's called the Maya Biosphere Reserve that's highlighted there, in the Mayan forest, which is the border between Belize, Mexico, and Guatemala. And I worked there for about a decade on the ground, trying to get that reserve established and under management. And what the inset image highlights is all the fires that have been occurring in a national park. In fact, the wetland, Ramsar designated wetland of international importance, as well as Laguna del Tigre, it's called National Park. All those fires are happening there, but they're not happening in multiple use zone, which is managed for forest products by communities. And that's the green part that doesn't have the fires. And I think that that's one example that's acknowledged as demonstrating a lot of best practices in terms of involving local people to address their needs while also conserving forests. But how do we create markets for biomass? That is a challenge until we get a carbon tax. I think it's going to be difficult. Here in the southeast, just above where that yellow arrow is, you can see a lot of red on the map. We have a lot of burning here right now, and it happens this is just 24 hours, by the way. You can download this map at any time. This is 24 hours as of yesterday. Fires in the world, burning, and smoke that we could be using for some benefit to society rather than just getting rid of it. But because there are no markets and because it is a challenge to manage it logistically and handle it and process it, we just burn it to dispose of it. So I think we need to think about how do we create those markets and avoid all the waste. And with that, I will go on to the discussion and the questions. I know there are a lot of questions. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Keith. That was great. I wanted to ask you to maybe expand a little bit before we go to the group chat. I wanted to ask you to expand a little bit on the trust building. It seems to me that you were talking about largely building trust within local markets. I was wondering if there's any extrapolations that you could suggest to building trust amongst a broader consumer base.
Yeah, well, I think that some of the certification standards are working at that, but it's a challenge. I think it's a big challenge, and my conclusion is that it's kind of you get the science and the data, and that's helpful, and we try to work with that. But then you have to deal with people almost one-on-one, and it will have to spread through. First, you have to have a relationship of trust to be able to then get people to even listen often, and changing opinions on something as emotional for some people as using, for example, woody biomass for energy. It is a big hurdle, and it is a big challenge. I don't think we have a challenge in terms of land available or biomass supply per se. I think we have a challenge in getting the right incentives to manage the land and to get the markets right. And to get public acceptance is perhaps the biggest challenge. I don't have an easy answer other than it will take time.
So I think at this point, I'm going to open up the conversation to the rest of the panelists, but I'd like to build on this idea of sustainability and better land management. And I think we could go in the order of our speakers, where perhaps we could go all the way back to Reiner and ask Reiner to comment on what is the land management that you think would be most relevant for some of these MUC lands in Europe, and how we could, what are the types of communities that we could bring on board? And then to Dr. Sola, who mentioned at the end of her talk that there was all of this debate happening in Kenya now about the use of this invasive species. How can we broaden the appeal of better land management practices that yield better bioenergy? Reiner.
Yeah, thanks a lot. First of all, thanks to all co-panelists. It was very, very interesting contributions that I think covered quite a good spectrum. Now on the land management, on these MUC lands, there will be certainly different approaches. So for instance, in the reclamation of former mining areas, which is a hot topic in many regions of Europe currently, this is usually governed by law, controlled by law, and sometimes these laws even are detrimental to the use of biomass for energy. Yeah? So basically that would be sort of political, legal, regulatory issues involved. What we found difficult is we need to create the trust and the markets, as Keith was nicely placed there. So in fact, we are currently facing the difficulty to convince the general public, but also farmers or other landowners, to actually produce biomass on such lands, as opposed to just leave them alone. You know, now Keith has hinted at some dangers of leaving land alone, and unfortunately I don't really have a solution on how we could regain the trust, because I believe that bioenergy is constantly under fire, you know, for some good, but many not so good reasons, I would believe. So if anyone has an idea how we could reestablish the trust. And then for the markets, of course, this is very different in different regions in Europe, especially on these low-yielding lands. It is also a matter of economy, as I was saying before. So we would need some further incentives. But then, of course, we face the other group saying we should just leave these lands alone. So, but then we can't say. So this is an intrinsic difficulty. I am part of the community saying that biomass is important. We can use it in a sustainable way, and we can use all different kinds of lands. But there is still things to do here. Thank you.
Great. Dr. Sola, could you expand on your observations of the people that are living where the invasive species is taking over? It seems that maybe if they're just pastoralists, they might just move their flocks somewhere else. But what drivers could lead people to manage these lands better? And in that management actually generate more bioenergy? What do you think is relevant for Kenya and some of the other countries in your project?
Okay, thank you. I think the first thing I want to comment is on pastoralism. It was easy a few decades ago to say I'm a pastoralist, I can move my cattle elsewhere and so on. Now pastoralists are actually becoming agro. They are becoming more sedentary. They are spending more time in one place. So managing grazing areas is really important. And what Prosopis has done is to take over those little grazing lands, and it has blocked access routes even for some livestock to move around. There are some thickets that even a goat cannot go through. So it really is an outcry for pastoralists, and also these are agriculturally marginal areas. Really, agricultural production is more viable with irrigation, not rain-fed agriculture. Of course, with climate change, we are experiencing so much flooding in these areas. So, but in terms of trying to broaden this outcry to make it a lobby and so on, I think what Michaela said at the beginning, bioenergy has been demonized for a long time. And you find that we don't have enabling policy framework that will attract investments. People are not confident about this subsector to say, actually, I can put my money and invest and take the risk. We might want to look for partners that can de-risk the investments in the bioenergy sector. That's one. Two, we also need to incentivize landowners to invest in a tree. Not just the investors Prosopis, but also other trees like Levacidia, tree planting itself. The tree is not valued. If you do a value chain analysis of bioenergy, the tree itself has no value. The value starts at the next level. So those are the things that I think we really need to look at, having an enabling framework, have investment, but incentivize management of trees for bioenergy.
No, that's actually a very, very good point. And it's a sort of a classic supply-demand issue where how do we take, if there's not some demand, they're not going to plant the tree. So we need to develop a more holistic approach. But that's very helpful, Dr. Sola. Thank you very much. Carolina, how can RSB help build trust?
Hi.
That was a very rapid question for you, but we have about a minute left, and so I'm going to ask, how can RSB build trust? And then I will give Keith the last word on trust building.
Quickly, I think we heard a lot about sustainability now mainly with this transition for low carbon economy and also related to COVID pandemic. So what's really sustainable? I think sustainability is not only a word that we can use in market and communication, but we need to prove sustainability. And I think RSB can support companies, organizations, and governments in this way, because we have a robust standard, and we can use this methodology and these tools to guide companies in a sustainable journey, and to prove to the market that the things are produced in a sustainable way. I think this is the main message related to RSB.
Great. And then Keith, we'll finish with you, and then we will all applaud in our respective homes. Keith?
Thanks everyone. Thanks, Jerry. I do want to go back to Ryder and the concept of leaving land alone, because unfortunately humans have already had such impact, not just on climate, but on air pollution, all these invasives, pests, bugs, everything is changing. And we are responsible. And so we need to do some interventions in many cases to manage what we've already done. Right. But I'm a big supporter of conservation, parks, and reserves. Let's set 25-30% land apart. We still got the other 70% we need to manage. And right now we're mismanaging it, and we just need to manage it better and get the incentives right. I think the first big one is to get a carbon tax. We need to have an incentive to start managing carbon in a more balanced way. We're trying to have bioenergy compete with fossil. Yeah. When fossil has eons of investment of energy, growth, time, pressure, heat, all this energy and time is there. It's embodied in the fossil energy. And we don't give any price to that. In fact, we subsidize taking it out of the ground.
All right, Keith.
Take it off.
Gonna rain you. All right, very good. No. I think we're all agreed, but taking on fossil fuel subsidies is beyond the scope, I shall say. So just allow me one more time to thank our setup speakers, our keynotes with Toshi and Michaela. I want to thank Posiso, Carolina, Reiner, and Keith. I think that we have scratched the surface on bringing more supply into production. I think it's very clear that there is land that could be sustainably intensified, and I will look forward to the remainder of this session and hand off perhaps to Bharadwaj or to Toshi. So thank you everyone for your attention and for your questions. I think if you follow up with your questions, we will certainly seek to connect you to the speakers and get any of your questions from the panel answered. So it looks like we have a digital break, and so I'm going to turn off my camera and say thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Gerard, and our distinguished speakers. You all kick off the session with an insightful discussion on ways to diversify and scale up biomass, feedstock production. What are the challenges you are facing, and what are the experiences and innovative approaches from your part of the world? Truly international panel. Thank you very much. And now we will take a very short panel break to prepare our next panelists. But stay tuned to what comes next after the break, when we will dive deeper into experiences and innovative approaches to transition from fossil-based economy to nature-based bioeconomy. We will be back in approximately 1-2 minutes. Thank you. Okay, let's come back and to our next panel discussion, which will focus on experiences and innovative approaches from different regions around the world for systemic biomass conversion to accelerate the transition from fossil-based economy to nature-based bioeconomy. And it is my pleasure to introduce you to our next moderator, Mr. Bharadwaj Kumamuru, Executive Director of the World Bioeconomy Association. Please, Bharadwaj, over to you.
Hello, just to check, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and we can see you. Thank
Perfect.
you.
Just a clarification is from the World Bioenergy Association. Anyway, first of all, welcome again to all the participants who are joining us from around the world. In case if we are located, say, for example, in Sweden, as we are, I would have welcomed you all to a cold and rainy weather in Stockholm. But I hope you all have a wonderful weather back home where you are joining us from. I'm pleased to have actually see quite a lot of participants in this panel discussion. I think it shows that there's a significant interest in this important topic on innovative solutions for maximizing biomass value streams. My name is Bharadwaj Kumamuru. As mentioned, I'm the Executive Director of the World Bioenergy Association. We are a not-for-profit, non-governmental organization based in Stockholm, established in 2008. And over the past 12 years, we've been a constant vocal voice for promoting bioenergy technologies around the world. I'm pleased to be a moderator for this session, and I'm pleased to invite a diverse panel of experts who will share experiences from the industry on innovative approaches for efficient conversion of biomass as we move towards a renewable based, nature-based bioeconomy from a fossil-based bioeconomy. The format we'll follow is quite similar to the previous session, that we'll have 4 presentations each from the panelists. Then we'll have a moderated, I hope we have good enough time to have a moderated discussion. So to all the participants who are joining in, please send in your questions as any time. And depending on the time we have, we'll try to answer as many as possible. So I'll briefly stop here, and then I'll give the floor to our first speaker, Henrik Brodin from Sobra, responsible for business development and public affairs of energy at the Swedish forestry company since 2016. So Henrik, the floor is yours. And of course, please turn on your microphone and the camera for your presentation.
Yeah, thank you. So you hear me? Yeah, I represent Södra. I'm responsible for business development, energy, and I'm also working a lot, especially with biofuels, which I will come back to. Södra is a forest company. We are owned by 52,000 members. So to become an owner of Södra, you have to own forest. So this is an economical society where landowners have gone together to actually make additional value out of the forest. So what we are doing is to create value for our forest owners. And we have 2.6 million hectares of forest. We handle 17.1 square meters wood volume each year, and we have 3 pulp mills and 7 sawmills. But we also, of course, use a lot of energy, but we're also an energy provider and an energy company selling energy. So if we look at the next slide, we have last year external deliveries of energy of 5 terawatt hours, mainly solid biofuels. So it's going to district heating, electricity, and that types, either as solid biomass or pellets. We also sell electricity, and we have district heating from our pulp mills. And we also have some liquid fuels like tall oil and turpentine. This can be used as energy as well. And if we take next slide. We are also into the biofuels area. We have a company together with Sunpine, with Preem and two other Swiss companies called Sunpine, where we produce biodiesel, advanced diesel from tall oil, which is a residue you get when you produce pulp, paper pulp. We also actually will have our grand opening tomorrow for the world's first biomethanol plant from forest biomass. And we have a joint venture in Norway with Statkraft, where we are building right now a demo plant for an HTL technology, where you have high pressure, high temperatures, and produce bio-crude. You can do biodiesel from solid biomass. So in this company, in these 3 biofuels, we use different sources, different residues from our production, our other productions. So Sunpine is from the pulp mills, methanol is from the pulp mill, from another stream in the pulp mill, and Silva Green Fuel is sawdust, bark, branches and tops, and other solid residue biomass. which we aim to upgrade to a more transportation-friendly biocrude that can go into the transport sector. So this is what we are doing in terms of biofuels.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Henrik. That was a very short and quite impactful presentation. Just a quick follow-up. You said close to 5 terawatt-hours of energy deliverable by solar, isn't it? I think that's about, just to consider the scale of it, it's about 1% of the total Swedish energy supply?
Yeah, I think it's something like that. And then also, if we look at the total Swedish supply, we use a lot of energy by our own, our pulp mills. So I think it's 3 times more. So if we should calculate on the total amount of energy used in Sweden, and then we must calculate with the internal as well. And then I think we are like 4 or 5% of the Swedish energy.
Okay, excellent. It's a very unique case for Sweden.
Yes.
I think we'll come back to questions after all the presentations. I can now quickly move on to our next speaker. We've been joined by Mr. Timothy Ong. He's a Senior Vice President at the agency Inovasi Malaysia. The AIM's Strategic Impact Projects Division, it works to transform strategic sectors in Malaysia, creating new industries and high-value jobs for Malaysians. We're pleased to have Mr. Timothy join us. The floor is yours.
Hello. Can everyone hear me properly? Okay. So, first of all, thank you. Maybe a little explanation, since we have hopefully within the time range that I have, I will be able to explain because I only have 3 slides, so that should be quite simple. First of all, I applaud some of the questions or some of the points that were made in the first panel, because those were exactly the kinds of issues that I'm getting on the day in, day out basis, right? So just a little bit of background on the agency. We are a full government agency. So we don't belong to any commercial entity. So that the only interest that we have is in terms of leveraging the bioresource that we have in Malaysia, and how we then convert that into sustainable industries. So the deployment of circular economic models as well as sustainability will be the core of each of those developments. And in today's presentation, I'm basically highlighting one of those projects that we have in Malaysia that's recently been launched. So the reason why we're picking this is because it helps showcase the level that's required as far as a holistic development is concerned when it comes to projects like these. Because we've gone through all the learnings that were mentioned by the previous panels, including building the invasive species, like in Kenya. We have similar situations in this part of the world. We were faced with a very demonized oil palm industry, as you would know. I mean, that's something that Malaysia and Indonesia has got the rough of internationally, and having to put this together and to have international companies understand and as well as believe in the development concept that we have is something quite refreshing, right? So this is quite new. I mean, we just had the development partners signed into this project in July. So I would say that's probably 2 or 3 months old. Can I move to the first slide, please? Thank you. So I think if you look at the whole approach to this project, it's really around a complete, I wouldn't say exhaustion, but an optimization and a maximization of the bioresource. To us, we looked at it from a very localized standpoint. So even in Malaysia, we have different parts of the country that will have different value possibilities. if we look at the spread of and concentration of biomass in Malaysia, you are looking at the concentration of 3 out of 85% of that resource spread across 3 different locations, and we have 13 different states in Malaysia, and so this gives you a perspective in terms of where the concentrations are. So it's really not many, right? So we have 2 different regions in Malaysia, where you have the peninsula, which is the west side of Malaysia, and the other portion, which is in the Borneo Island. And in that situation, most of the concentration of the bioresources reside in the Borneo Island itself. So the reason why I'm using Borneo Island is because something that could resonate with the international community. That's the audience that we have today. And this is just, and Sarawak happens to be the northern part of Borneo. Right, so unfortunately, I don't have the map with me. I have only 3 slides. I do actually have a very elaborated video on this project, but I don't think the bandwidth would support something like that. So for anybody that really wants to have more information on this project, they could really talk. They could take it with the organizers of this of IRENA, or they can take it up personally on the chat. Can I move to the next slide, please? So the whole project that we talked about is really around, the 3 different pillars, right, that we talked about from an economic perspective, the social aspects of it, and the sustainability of those 3 components. And if you look at the way this project is developed, you're looking at a biorefinery concept, but it's not limited to an individual plant. So you're looking at a complete region in Malaysia that has been turned into a massive biorefinery. And in that sense, we have, obviously, this is a project that's not going to be spearheaded or championed, purely by a single company, or it's more a consortium-based approach when we develop this project. So you really have a public-private partnership, and the local communities are involved in this project. Can we move to the next slide? Thank you. So this gives you an illustration on, the way we look at this project, right? So when we talk about a biohub port project, we're talking about an end-to-end value chain where the whole, the basic assessment on the LCAs come all the way from the upstream all the way to the downstream, and eventually the bioproducts and the export. And we're talking about partnerships with the port authorities. We're talking about partnership with world-leading ports like the Port of Rotterdam. And we're talking to a lot of downstream companies, and most of which are mostly oil and gas majors, right? And the complexity of a project like this is, how does that relate back to the existing industries in those locations itself? So is there a possibility that this entire ecosystem actually helps make the existing industries, whether it's the oil and gas sector or the existing agricultural sector, greener? Right? I think that's one of those components. So it's not a mutually exclusive discussion where it's one or the other. It's how you create that symbiotic relationship between these various kinds of different industries that coexist, right, in this kind of a setup. So I won't say that it's we are now in the implementation stages of this project. We are looking at a 10-year development timeline for this. Obviously, the jobs is very important for the Malaysian government. Same goes to what the rural community or the communities that we operate in would stand to benefit from such a system. But I think the key of this entire project anchors on sustainability, right? So we really would have to deploy all the necessary tools. So you're not talking about just the need for big data analytics, artificial intelligence, a lot of these sensors picking up the data and all that. These are all built in as part and parcel of this infrastructure. And in this project, one of the key elements to basically de-risk a lot of these, investments coming into this space. Like, I think that's one of the points that were being mentioned over and over again, the markets and the ability to de-risk a lot of these things, is we take the responsibility of handling the biomass away from the downstream companies. So now we are looking at biomass as a basic infrastructure for this project. So you're not looking at them having to come in and then, you know, have to deal with the local dynamics of handling the situation, right? So that the government and the local governments and the federal governments will be part and parcel of helping develop this entire ecosystem together with the likes of the international companies or sustainable partners in this kind of a project. So I think that to me, it's a different way of looking at it, because since 2011, we've been working on this. Malaysia has got a strategy surrounded entirely on just the biomass in sector or the biomass resource that we have. And I think we have done a lot of trial and errors in developing different projects. So we do have multiple biomass projects on ground, right? But unfortunately, a lot of these projects create a sustainability issue, right? So because you are really looking at the end side of things as opposed to the entire value chain. So I think this is one of those learnings that we picked up over time. And I think the technology today, to a certain extent, warrants a lot more of that being incorporated into this kind of projects. So, you know, we'll be happy to connect with, people that are like-minded and interested in this sector. We are, in fact, talking to Indonesia already in this, because we are neighbors at the end of the day. And I think there is a complete synergies in terms of how we could develop the entire ecosystem together. So I think that's basically just in a nutshell, one of the major flagship projects that we have now in Malaysia when it comes to a fully circular as well as a bio-based or sustainable bioeconomy approach to a project. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, Tim, for the presentation. Quick question: is it quite late in Malaysia right now?
Well, it's way past my bedtime. It's 1 a.m. so yeah.
Thanks for joining us so late. Quick follow-up. I mean, the concept of BioHub is quite interesting, and it's glad that you've made the core emphasis on sustainability representation, which is what would be the first question or the first point whenever we talk about bioenergy, but not just in, say, Malaysia, but also in Indonesia. And you've also mentioned a bit about local communities and so on. But I think we'll come back to those questions a bit later on after all the presentations. So thanks again for this presentation. And we quickly move on to our next speaker. That would be Mr. Jeffrey Bell, who's the CEO of Microbiogen. Jeff, the floor is yours.
Can you hear? Very good. Look, thanks for the kind introduction. I'm still trying to figure out whether I'm up very, very late or up very, very early in the morning here in Australia. It's about 4 in the morning, so I'm going to think of it as an early morning. Look, thanks for everybody turning up and listening. I just want to give you a little bit of an introduction first and about what we see as 2 innovative solutions in the biomass value chain. So I run a company called Microbiogen. We're an industrial technology company. We specialize in Saccharomyces cerevisiae. That's the world's microorganism. It's basically responsible for, beer, wine, spirits, but also anytime or most of the time you produce first generation biofuels, or even for that matter second generation biofuels, you use this organism. It's very, very widely used, and that's what we specialize in. That's all we do, and we've been doing it for 20 years. So the 2 solutions the 2 innovative solutions I want to talk about that we've been involved in is the first one is in relation to the next generation biocatalysts for second generation biofuels. So what we've done is we've developed a new optimized organism that can result in a biorefinery producing fuel and food quite efficiently, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. And the second one I want to talk about is utilizing lignin as a metallurgical coal replacement and some of the process and economic advantages of that. And in that metallurgical coal replacement, we're actually collaborating with one of the leading companies in the world that looks at alternatives for metallurgical coal production or steel. They've successfully developed the University of New South Wales polymer injection technology. Essentially, that's using old tyres, you add that to the metallurgical coal, and you improve the output of steel. And this has been commercialised around the world with over 84,000 heats and over 2.4 million recycled tyres already utilised. So that's a very successful project. That's the second project I want to talk about. So if you can move to the next slide. Okay, thanks. So the first area I want to look at in terms of improving that value chain, and not just the value chain, but also the sustainability, is looking at what we're doing in our, what we call the optimization of biocatalysts for second generation biofuels. Now, this is a project, it's not just us, we are collaborating with one of the big industrial biotech companies in the world. And I guess this project's been a 14-year culmination. It's gone through 3 programs. We've spent about $30 million on it. And we're very close now to the final milestone being passed for actually a commercial product. So what's the difference? What are we doing that's a bit different? Now, I talked about our platform technology has quite successfully developed biocatalysts for first generation biofuels. So any of you that know the Novozymes and Nova products, those have been developed by us. We're using that same technology and applying it to second generation biofuels. And the key things that what we're adding to it is we've taken the best biocatalysts out there today and we've improved them. That is, we've made them more acid resistant, temperature tolerant, hydrolysis resistant. So they will be able to operate in these more difficult conditions in the 2G field. That was the first thing we did. The second thing we've done is, for the first time, we've made the biocatalyst able to grow on its own waste stream. Now, if you look at the little cartoon on the right-hand corner, down the bottom, what you'll do is, with our biocatalyst, you'll do a primary fermentation. From that, you will strip out the ethanol, but there's always this waste stream that you produce. It's full of things like xylitol, residual sugars, glycerols, organic acids. And what we've done is we've developed the biocatalyst to be able to grow on its own waste stream. So once you've taken out the ethanol, you end up with this stream of low-value product that typically would go into a biogas producer or something like that, or you put it on the fields. But what we will do is our biocatalyst will grow on that to produce lots of yeast. That yeast will be used then for your fermentation, and excess yeast is a high-value product. So what it does is the impact of this is the numbers we're generating suggest revenue lift of somewhere between 10 and 20% due to a combination of things like higher conversions, no detoxification required, and you're producing a secondary high-quality product. And it turns a Gen 2 ethanol facility into basically a food and fuel biorefinery. And for those talking about energy crops, if you're using sugarcane or energy crops, the advantage is that you can grow an energy crop and actually you'll be producing more protein from that field than if you were grazing cattle, for example. So a really nice little solution. As I said, we're very close to actually having full-scale trials and product out to market in 2021. If we go to the next slide, please. The second area we've worked on, and microbiogens certainly aren't experts in the field of metallurgical coal replacements, but what we did do is through our 15 years plus of working in second generation biofuels, we were producing small quantities of lignin and wondering what to do with it. We were approached by the University of New South Wales and they did a whole lot of work in terms of can you use the lignin as a met coal replacement. And the concept here is if you take a 2G plant now and just burn the lignin for power, you're effectively getting the value of thermal coal. But if you can take that lignin and utilise as a met coal replacement, well, met coal sells at about twice the price of thermal coal. So it has some commercial implications. We did a whole lot of work over a 3 or 4 year period, or the Smart Centre of the University of New South Wales did. And what was interesting is that they found that the lignin actually is an effective substitute, especially in blast furnaces. And you can see the pictures on the right hand there. There's a whole report they've done on this, and actually the IEA has presented it and published it. But it actually works quite well, and you could replace either a small percentage or a large percentage of met coal with lignin if you just extracted it from your 2G plant. The innovation impact, we estimate somewhere between 10% improvement in the revenue stream for a 2G plant if you were to replace. Of course, you still need energy, but you might be able to replace that with renewables, wind, solar, etc. And it leads to more sustainable steel production. So that's it from me. I'm happy to answer any questions, and thanks for your time.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Jeff. I think sometimes people who are in Europe, we take it for granted in terms of the time zones that most of the events we have are CEST based. So thanks joining in so early from Australia. And I'm glad that you've talked a lot about the food and fuel, because that's the debate we keep getting a lot of times in our discussions, that the increasing use of biomass for biofuel would hinder food, which is not usually the case, that both of them have a lot of synergies involved. But I think we'll come and address those questions later on. Quickly, the second innovation that you've mentioned on the use of lignin, what's the status of commercialization for that technology? Is it still research or pilot level? Or?
I mean, it's that always the chicken and the egg. Until you have, when we presented the information, of course, a whole group of steel companies approached and said, this is great, how do we commercialise this? But you actually need a second generation plant with lots of lignin available. And because the plants being built to date generally burn their lignin, it's not available for, so you actually have to design your next generation plant to actually separate the lignin for another product. So, while the technology will work, there's going to be a lot of work done before it gets to a commercial outcome, just simply because of, building new plants and having offtake agreements, etc.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thanks for the presentation again. We finally move to our last speaker, US Bioenergy Technologies Office. He's a System Development and Integration Program Manager. So Jim, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me okay?
A bit low, but I think yes.
Let me speak up. So I'm going to talk to you briefly about the U.S. Department of Energy Bioenergy Program. This program has been active for about 30 years or more, and we look at a wide range of near-term, mid-term.
Jim, can you move the microphone down? It's going to be better then.
Too loud? Too loud or too soft?
Yeah, a bit soft. So maybe could you speak a bit louder?
Okay, how about that?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, the microphone's not very good on this computer, and it does not work on this headset. So again, I work for the U.S. Department of Energy Bioenergy Technologies Program, and as mentioned before, we need much greater deployment of bioenergy to reach the expectations and the opportunity that biomass and bioenergy can contribute in the nearer and longer term scenarios. And of course, the feedstock must be handled sustainably, as the case has been made. In all cases, that's an absolute requirement. That's a fundamental principle of using biomass at all. We look at a broad range of feedstocks. Traditionally, we've looked at agricultural residues and forest residues as one of the major opportunities. Agricultural residues have proven to be difficult to handle inside a power plant, so we continue to work on that area. Forest residues are challenging in terms of the efficiency to gather them. We've also looked at dedicated energy crops, but not spent as much effort on that in the last decade or so. It's an area with tremendous opportunity, but needs a lot more development. More recently, we're turning to other challenging feedstocks, so including sorted municipal solid waste and wet waste. And both of these have the efficiency challenge of being difficult to sort municipal solid waste, coming in very low density, very distributed resources, and the wet waste having the challenge of all the water that you have to deal with to process and potentially dry, or at least just co-process with your conversion technologies. Longer term, we're looking at algae as well, but we see that as again, a longer term opportunity. Near term, they're having great success.
Jim?
Yes.
Sorry to disturb. Your microphone, is it tilted up?
This microphone does not work.
Okay. Okay, continue. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. So it's the microphone through the laptop. I apologize. If you could click, please, on the PowerPoint, go to the next, not the next slide, but yes, just right here. And I wanted to know, can we go back one, please? There we go. Back. Can we go back, please? To show the pictures on the right side. There we go, right there. So I also wanted to let you know that in addition to these traditional feedstocks, we're looking at longer term opportunities. For example, CO2, various sources of CO2, whether they're dilute or a very processed stream like from ethanol plants. And we're also looking at the very challenging feedstock and challenging opportunity of plastics. That is a tremendous pollutant, as we all know, in our environment, and has been poorly recycled and recycled at very low levels up until now. So with all these different feedstock opportunities, we've been investing in integrated biorefineries for really going on about 2 decades with some mixed success. But we know that the biorefinery approach is absolutely critical to maximize the benefits coming out of these conversion processes. The key markets that we're looking at besides bioproducts and biochemicals include heavy-duty transport and aviation and marine, not surprisingly. We don't see as much need in the light-duty transport area, other than the opportunities with ethanol and cellulosic ethanol. But longer term, we see the great opportunities and need, in particular in aviation, and the emerging opportunity in marine. So speaking of CO2 as an opportunity, the next slide just illustrates, if I could go forward, illustrates the wide-ranging complexity of various conversion processes and various outputs for a CO2 stream and moving towards negative emissions. I won't go into this in any detail, just to say that this area needs a lot more analysis and a lot more testing and development, much longer term opportunity. You can make a similar diagram as this and a similar level of complexity with traditional biomass feedstocks. This happens to be a diagram for CO2 with a little bit of traditional biomass mixed in. So just to say, if we need a lot more development, there's tremendous opportunities for beyond fuel, also biochemicals and bioproducts, and the U.S. Department of Energy is investing in all of these areas. Fuels is our main mission area, but we also see chemicals and materials and products as an enabler to fuels in the long term. So thank you.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. Kind of complexity of not just the CO2 utilization, but also for bioenergy in terms of the various types of feedstock, the conversion pathways, the end products, and also the competing uses for bioenergy at the end. Perfect. So I think we are well ahead of the time schedule. I would request now if all the panelists would turn on their their camera so we can all see you, and we could have a short moderated discussion where we're going to address a certain key questions on feedstock, on technology, on sustainability, as well as competition with other products. I also see there's a lot of questions we are getting from the audience. We'll try to address as many of them as possible. But first, as we've heard from Toshima-san at the start, for satisfying some of the requirements of the scenarios for bioenergy, we need to increase the supply of biomass, I think 4 times from the current supply of about 50 to 60 exajoules. We need close to 150 to 200 exajoules or so. So the question, I think we can follow the order of the presentation starting from Henrik, would be what are the innovations you see in your particular industries or any particular industry in the bioenergy sector in terms of increasing the utilization of existing biomass feedstock, but also trying to identify new sources of biomass which are not currently being utilized and which could be utilized in the near future. What are the innovations you see? So please let us know. We can start with Henrik first, and we follow the order.
Thank you. If we look from Solar perspective, for first, we have a target of our forests shall have grown by faster, 20% faster, 2050 than right now. And to do so, we have, of course, to do a lot of things. Of course, we can rely on the climate change, which makes the forests grow faster, but I don't think it's a good way of handling it. But also, I think for getting more fields, there are some things that are more important than others. And to plant trees is actually the most effective way to get more feedstock. And to do so, you have, as a forest owner, know that you have the right to actually use to harvest. The one who plants shall be the one who harvests. So I think this is actually more important than innovations to the right to use your forest, and that we have forestry to a global understanding of forestry as a solution of the climate problem rather than to use the forestry as a carbon sink. The best way to actually manage it is to have a well-managed forest. So that's the most important. But then, of course, it's I think you have to work with energy efficiency on all your technologies and to actually find residues, to upgrade residues to products. And with products, I mean energy as well. So, but the advanced biorefineries is, I think, it's the single most important innovation that we have to actually accelerate to be able to decarbonize with the help of forest biomass.
Thanks, Henrik. Maybe Tim, you could probably elaborate on do you see innovations in say increasing or maximizing the current use of the feedstock you see in Malaysia, and what are the new types of feedstock you think would help assist in implementing this concept of biohub in the region?
Yeah, I think obviously we've seen a shift, right, as far as innovation is concerned, as in the approach and the way they look at feedstock and the idea of a biorefinery and the multiple products that can come up from it, the investigation of the various waste streams and the variation of those waste streams are key, right? Because the multi-feedstock possibility for a biohub, it's a key enabler. Because when we start looking into it, there are seasonalities to feedstock. There are, different challenges to mobilizing different kinds of feedstock. And with that, if you have an option or if you have a variation of those different components in a whole ecosystem, that's what makes a sustainable project in the long term. So we are seeing, obviously, the waste streams from the oil palm industry is one of the massive staple that we have because of the sheer volumes that Malaysia produces due to its agricultural activities. But anything from municipal solid waste to forestry waste or even garden waste, or all those components are being thought of. Of course, we are looking at possibility of using local species of grasses, right? Very similar to your energy cane or that, but it's purely on marginal land not suitable for agriculture because we are very mindful on the sustainability aspect and the food for fuel issue that will come in if those items are not properly managed. But I think one of the key values of top of that is the word management, right? I think we have mentioned that over and over again, the management of the entire supply chain and the transparency and the traceability of that whole supply chain will be key, right? To me, the feedstock may vary depending on activity. In fact, there are already a lot of people that are conventionally doing oil palm, right? Oil palm plantations that have shifted into food crops, right? Because of the current COVID-19 situation, right? And the overall situation of that. So we cannot say that feedstock will not change over time. It will, right? But how ready is your entire system to take that in? So the ability to distribute the varying types of feedstock with the varying industries that is connected to your ecosystem, I think that's one of the key things that we are looking at when we are developing this project.
Perfect. Thanks, Tim. Jeff, I mean, for bioethanol or biofuel production, traditionally it has always been corn or sugarcane, direct fermentation, produce ethanol, but now we see a lot of discussion on cellulose and lignin, as you've already mentioned. But looking just at the transport sector, what are the innovations you see in new types of feedstock for biofuel production? Your microphone. Sorry.
Yeah. So look, we're not experts on biomass, but I guess we can observe. What's interesting is depending where you are in the world, you have a different view. You know, if you're a European versus an Australian, European is much more limited in its land mass and limited in its biomass opportunities. Whereas a country like Australia, we have vast areas of unutilized land. Of course, if you're going to use that land, you need to use it sustainably. But from my perspective, the big thing for biomass, it's all about the density you can get. You're competing against fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are super dense. They've been developed over years, and they're very, you know, you can go in and get an oil field with vast amounts in a small area. So to me, the critical point for biomass is having tons per hectare, not having to transport too far. So to me, the future is energy crops, where you can go into decent areas and produce significant quantities, economies of scale, and low unit cost, because it has to compete on price. You know, I don't know whether we're ever going to get a carbon price around the world, but you need to be competitive, and you need to make sure that you know, your price that you can produce at. And to me, the critical thing there is having enough biomass. The technology is coming. And, you know, we've been doing this for 15 years. If you go back 15 years ago, the technology simply wasn't there to do second generation biofuels. That technology is advancing and has advanced. And while not a lot of companies are making a lot of noise about it anymore because it's not flavor of the month, you know, other things are the new silver bullets, progress is being made, and you'll continue to see that progress. And, you know, we're doing just our little bit, and there are lots of people doing other parts, and it will progress. My only concern is we're not progressing fast enough for what's actually required to get it done.
Perfect. Thanks so much. That's what we keep promoting. Being in Sweden, there's one of the highest carbon taxes in the world. But we hope that there will be a ambition in other parts of the world as well on that. Finally, Jim, you've had an excellent slide initially on various types of feedstock, which I guess are in various stages of development. So what do you see, for example, in the United States? What are the most promising feedstocks looking ahead in the future? Where do you see which ones will have the greatest impact?
We think we'll need to use a wide range of feedstocks. but we still believe that agricultural residues offer tremendous potential. They haven't been fully exploited in terms of the main example that has typically been looked at is corn stover. So that needs more development in order to be able to process it effectively. But all of these other feedstocks also need to be brought into play if we're really going to make the big impacts. Forest waste, for example, wet waste, municipal solid waste. And then another big area of development at the moment, primarily driven by the California market, is renewable diesel. And renewable diesel is being made by a combination of either dedicated oil crops, which is not preferred, or waste resources of waste food or cooking oil or plant oils. But there's only so much of that to go around. So we think it will be volume limited on the waste oil side of things. But at the moment, it's receiving tremendous growth, and there are literally billions of gallons worth of annual capacity that are currently being developed to go into the California market. And then longer term, we have opportunities, for example, with algae or CO2, well, primarily those two, with a lot of development and many years to come.
Perfect. Thanks, Jim. It's a fascinating concept with so much feedstocks and so much potential as well. Moving on from feedstock, we'll start looking at say technology. For example, from Sodra, we've heard of these very different technological pathways for utilizing various biomass, forestry-based feedstock. And first of all, congrats for this new biomethanol facility being inaugurated tomorrow. So what were the main drivers in having such kind of innovation in technology in utilizing different biomass streams to different products in the industry? What has been the drivers for this kind of innovation? You can start just focusing on technology. Maybe Henrik, you could start with that first.
Yes. And if we look for our innovations, I think it's go back to our roots, and where our mission is to create more value for our forest owners. So for us, we always have to find new ways to add value for the forest owner, and the best way to add value for the forest owner is to maximize the use of one tree. So if every tree is maximized. And in terms of that, we have worked a lot with energy efficiency at our pulp mills, which gives us the possibility to instead of use the residues from the wood to actually run the facilities, we can use it to make innovations. So this has been the main driver that we see that we can take out valuable streams. We have a lot of valuable residues. And if we can take them out, upgrade them to liquid products, and of course it can be solid products as well, but then it's easier to transport, and then we can go out and make even more value from the same amount of trees. So what's actually the driver behind this? It's of course the need for energy. The need, I will say, the energy sector is the driver. So the need for renewable energy is so important, and the price of fossil energy, back to this, what you talk about, the carbon price. So to actually drive this, when we see a value, then it's so much easier to actually focus on the innovation and to get more from the same amount of feedstock.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Henrik. Tim, do you have anything to add? Looking at innovative technologies which could feed into this biohub concept in the right now or in the near future?
Yeah, we're constantly in the lookout for new technologies, right? Because we believe that as an objective party in this whole development, where we are looking at how the nation, or at least from the project perspective, we could diversify the risk of being overly reliant, because we understand there are new technologies every day, right? Advancements are being made every day. Different technological pathways are taking place every day as well. But I think what we would hope to get ready is that once those technologies are ready, and we're working with a number of startups, whether it's from Sweden, whether it's from a lot of the European countries. In fact, the Dutch government is one of the parties that we work very closely with. We are looking at how these different technology platforms can actually value or increase the value proposition for the biohub, right? And with that means doing away with the need to localize a lot of these technologies by doing a lot of these development work on site. So that's why when you looked at the entire diagram on the ecosystem, you looked at demonstration facilities, piloting facilities, and things like that, we could actually use the local feedstock and then to scale it up on site, right? So that's one of those intangibles that we hope to bring to the hub, and that's something that we've discussed with the development partners of this project as well. That will be key in terms of identifying new technologies or new platforms that could make sense and constantly maximize the value of the biomass resource that we have.
Thanks, Tim. Jeff, of course, you've talked a lot about the innovation in the technology itself. Probably you could add a bit more on, is there a possibility that it could be replicated in other parts of the world with other types of feedstock, or what would you see going ahead in the future in terms of innovation in that particular sector?
Our strategy is we're a small company. There's 20 scientists working in Australia. So our strategy is to work with the big gorillas in the industry, because a small company like us isn't going to successfully commercialize our technology without someone to take that path to market. And if you actually, what's interesting, if you go back 10 or 12 years, if we had this conference in 2006, 2007, you'd have had 50 companies presenting on new technology for lignocellulosics. And I've got to tell you, of those 50 companies, I can think about one or two left. A lot of them had some success. Probably most of them it didn't actually get to market, but each of them have had some success. So that pathway to get through from concept to market is actually a huge, huge challenge. You can see it continuing though. In the US, the corn ethanol market, those guys are very innovative. They're turning their corn plants into biorefineries. There's all sorts of technology going in, and we're working in the forefront of that. And we can see in the next 2 or 3 years a whole lot of new technology coming in, increasing sustainability, reducing LCFs, improving that sort of stuff. So a lot going on, but you do need the big brothers out there. There's a lot of small companies doing things, and it's how you put, for a lignocellulosic plant to work, you probably need a good 15 technologies working together. And if you're missing some of them, that's a problem for you. So that process of how you get from technology through to an integrated biorefinery, to me, that's the big challenge. Probably most of the technology is there. Pre-treatment, all different pre-treatments, whether it's glycerols or acid or, steam explosion, they're all out there, but you've got to look at what works best with then the type of enzyme mix, or maybe using something else, and you've got your biocatalysts, and then so there's a ton of technology to work together. So progress being moved, I think it's impossible to tell you how it's. My conclusion would be, 2G is probably going to be more expensive than 1G biofuels for some time to come, and I'm not sure how that ever turns around. But for the world to achieve those targets, you're going to have to be accepting that there's got to be some sort of price on a carbon to make these things work. And, I think it's working in the US, particularly the California stuff. I think Renewable Bio's progressing in Brazil. So things are happening, and you'll see those technologies coming through over time.
Thanks. That's amazing. The US, of course. So Jim, of course, we've heard a bit on the transportation. So if you see, from the perspective of industry, because as Satoshi-san and the IRENA has pointed out, the need for more biomass in various industries, whether it's iron and steel, whether it's mining and chemicals and so on. What do you see some of the innovative ideas coming out in ensuring that we maximize the use of biomass in such kind of industries as well?
Certainly, there are lots of opportunities and lots of challenges, as Jeff was just talking about in the cellulosic area. The biggest challenge for most of these plants, and unfortunately many have not gone all the way through to commercial success, has been the pre-treatment, the pre-processing, the physical pre-processing and handling inside the plant, and then the pre-treatment. In almost every situation, this has been the Achilles heel of the plant. As they often say, if you can just get to the sugars, then it's easy for us to do something with it. Well, yes, it's getting to the sugars that is a big challenge. But there's been a lot of innovation in that area, and we expect to see more success going forward. And there are lots of other areas for innovation. For example, just biotech in general and synthetic biology has been a tremendous source of innovation and capability creation. We're creating new organisms with different capabilities, with greater selectivity for desired products. Companies like Amyris, for example, with farnesene, and so many others. The omics, the information omics has been a tremendous tool that is really propelling these various industries. You see an awful lot of success in synthetic food creation these days and meat replacements. That industry is really booming. But in almost all these industries, what is needed is just more development and more scaling. And oftentimes companies have stumbled because they haven't scaled carefully enough, or they've scaled too quickly, or they haven't had the funds to continue scaling on to the next scale. A lot of it is just really hard work. It takes a tremendous amount of time and, unfortunately, dollars to get to success. And the DOE is re-ramping up its focus on scaling technologies. In the last few years, we've cut back a little bit and focused more on, say, mid-TRL technologies and early to mid-stage development. But we realize that the integration step is so critical and so challenging that we're doubling down again on integration and scaling, and you'll see that coming out of the DOE program in the future.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Jim. It's good that we've started discussing about feedstock, we're discussing about technology, and I think when we first talk about bioenergy, the first question or discussion always comes up is about sustainability, and I think it's important that we briefly address that topic as well. As Michelle pointed out early on in her scene setting presentation, how bioenergy production and pathways have to meet all the necessary dimensions, socio-economic, environmental, to ensure that we sustainably produce bioenergy going ahead in the future. So I would request the panelists to have a quick word on in that particular industry. How are we ensuring that we ensure the sustainability is ensured in all these dimensions? Maybe Henrik, you could start with the forestry sector, particularly in Sweden, for example. How do we ensure sustainability?
Yes, in Sweden we have a national, let's say, taxation of forests. So we have the national forest taxation, where we every year have how much forest can we harvest, and how big is the growth, and this is measured by authorities. So we actually not take out too much forest. So then every company working in the forest sector has to adapt to these natural targets and to their own targets, and you also as a forest owner have to. So that's the way we are doing in Sweden. And then also when you harvest, you have to plant. We have a replantation law. So actually, if you look on Södra, for every tree we harvest, we plant 3 new trees. And this is very important. Then also we have different ways of biodiversity, so secure biodiversity, and we have lands that are set off for not being able to use to forestry, to also have biodiversity, and we also work with quite small harvesting areas. So when we harvest, we take quite small areas at the same time, not to affect the total forest or too much. So for us, sustainability is so important, and we want to harvest trees in the future as well, and then we must plant more trees than we harvest.
Perfect. Thanks, Henrik. Tim, I guess you get this question quite a lot. So, such an innovative concept such as a biohub, what are the safeguards you envision that have to be put in place to ensure that the sustainability is maintained in all dimensions?
I think one of the most important aspects is the availability of data and information, right? I think that's always the key. I mean, we can have a lot of these things monitored, but if we are only able to produce those data after a year of compilation or 2 years of compilation, I think appropriate actions could not be taken, right? At least from the decision makers' perspective. So I think the deployment of technology, the deployment of things such as smart mills, that's where the source is for a lot of these biomass. As well as sensors that are deployed at site, at plantations, and the monitoring mechanisms. That's why we involve now artificial intelligence data companies and areas of sorts in order to be able to capture those data, right, as part and parcel of the data system for the entire biohub. And I think a lot of these systems can be replicated to the other streams of feedstock that we will have going forward. And I think that, to me, is one of the key things, using technology to do that whole assessment and ensuring that all these parameters on sustainability is being met constantly.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Jeff, any quick comments on sustainability?
Well, just a couple of comments. I mean, look, sustainability is not our area. Obviously, sustainability is important. I just pose the questions to the people that really know about it. And from an Australian perspective, we, in our state of New South Wales, which is about the size of France and Germany combined, we do have reasonably well-run state forests, etc., and we try to do things sustainably. But last year, 30% of our forests got burnt down. Some very large proportion of our wildlife was killed, and this was burnt out due to the forest fires we had. So, we can do all this sustainability stuff, and you can plant trees, but if the climate changes too much, a lot of this sustainability just ends up getting burnt down. So, there's this tension between we've only got that 9% left in the carbon bucket, and we're going to blow through that. There's no question. So some of the sustainability questions worry me in the sense that we're focusing on the small stuff, and maybe the big stuff is going to make that redundant. In Australia, as I said, vast areas are getting burnt out, and we can be as sustainable as we like. So we've got that. To me, it's a mismatch. What's going on? We're trying to be sustainable, and it's a very good thing, but how is that going to work in 20 years' time? If you're planting forests in the northern hemisphere that get burnt out, how is that, how do we manage that? That's the question I pose. I'm not an expert.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Jeff. Sorry. Jim, sustainability, I guess, is also a quite important aspect in your line of work. What's your opinion on that?
If we're not doing biomass, bioenergy, bioproducts sustainably, then there would be no purpose. In most cases, especially in fuels, we may never compete on price, except possibly first-generation biofuels. But beyond that, we may never compete on price. So there has to be a sustainability benefit that hopefully will have some economic value at some point. Otherwise, we won't even. There's not a lot of points in it, honestly. When it comes to, say, biochemicals or bioproducts, they may be able to compete on price because of added value, added capabilities, added features that it might add to what is going into the material or the chemical. But again, in most cases, the sustainable aspect of it is also a net positive that is starting to be realized more and more. So sustainability is absolutely key, not just greenhouse gases, but oil and water, social aspects. All of them need to be considered, and they're absolutely fundamental in our program, in everything we look at.
Perfect. Thanks, Jim. So we have about 10 more minutes before we have to close the session. Probably a good time to quickly run through some of the questions. We've received quite a lot, but quickly, if we start with Henrik, a couple of questions. One was on climate change. How much does climate change constitute a problem for the forestry industry, and how do you ensure or include such considerations in your short and long-term planning going ahead? And the second question was on, is biodiesel cost effective with tall oil diesel?
Climate change is, of course, a great challenge for us. And we have had some major problems here in 2012. For certain, we had a disaster 15 years ago when there was a thunder going down, when actually very big volumes was going away in just one night. So we have like 4 years hot things fall down in one night. That was quite a big challenge, and we learned a lot from that as well. In Sweden, we also have had some wildfires the late years, which we have subbed up, and right now we have a quite big problem with bark beetle due to the drought. So we see that we all the time have this. So it's very high on our agenda, and we need to prevent. We need to find ways of working to actually be able to handle climate change, since we must, of course, work not getting the climate change, but there are facts right now that there is climate changes, and we have to work to actually minimize the risks. So, for example, we learned from the storms how we shall set up the forest instead with different tree species in different areas. We learned from the fires that with the drones and helicopters to go out quick and find it. And we are learning right now from the bark beetle. So we always have to be one way ahead of actually the climate change problems and have solutions. So we work with forest management in a way that minimize the damage. If you look at the tall oil, it's almost the same price as other HVO from other residues. For example, other vegetable oils or things like that. So it's a cost competitive price for HVO. It's of course not in the range as ordinary diesel, but if you compare to the HVO, it's cost competitive.
Perfect. Thanks, Henrik. Couple of quick questions to Jeffrey, if you could keep it quite short. First is there any cost analysis done for met coal compared to thermal coal? And the lignin adding value. If you could elaborate a bit on those 2 points quickly. Jeff?
I'll start with the heating value. There's a whole lot of characteristics required for a met coal. So it needs to have structure in it, needs to have the volatiles in it. And they found that it does have enough heating value in it. It's not as much as current metallurgical coal, but what it does have, it has some impurities in it, which is actually an advantage, because you want, when you're doing blast furnaces for your to get a I don't know what you call it. I'm not an expert in steel production, but you want a froth over the top to protect it from oxygen, etc. And the lignin actually has some advantages over the current metallurgical coal. Yes, it has lower carbon and lower energy, but these are not issues apparently for running a blast furnace. And you can either mix it in, or you could potentially run 100%, depending on the structure, because you need structure to hold the iron ore and the met coal together. And the first part of the question, sorry?
Was there any cost analysis compared to met coal to thermal coal?
Well, thermal coal can't be used in metallurgical coal applications. So, but roughly, met coal is typically double the price of thermal coal. So there's probably not much more that I can say than that.
Perfect. Thanks, Jeff. I think we'll have one final question from little Jim. I guess you get this question quite a lot. Algae for biofuels production. How far are we from a commercial facility without subsidies?
I can't really give a very specific answer on that. We know it's a ways off. We're working hard on it. We spend approximately 20% of our annual program budget on that. So $30 to $40 million a year, a considerable investment. But we think it's probably 10 years away or more. I can't be much more precise. I wish I could.
Thanks a lot. I guess we have quite close to the end of the session. So I'm sorry for those participants for those questions which we have not been able to answer. I guess you can get in touch with the organizers and post your questions directly to the speakers. So in summary, I think we've heard quite exciting interesting presentations on how do we maximize the biomass value streams for both for the industry and for transport sector. We've heard of a lot of innovative approaches in feedstock, in technology, also about sustainability, a very important aspect. So I would like to conclude by thanking all the panelists for excellent presentations and being part of the discussion. Thank you all for the participants also for staying on throughout this session. All please stay safe. And I see Paul's already on video, so I give the final word to Paul now.
Well, if you allow me to do the transition. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Brada Dvaj and our distinguished speakers. Sorry for mispronouncing your name. For another fruitful discussion. A lot was covered, but I'll let it wrap up by Paul. So thank you again very much to all of you. And again, to close the event, our Dr. President IRENA, Head of End-Use Sector of Bioenergy, will wrap up and recap all the insights shared today by our speakers, where we are and where all this innovation can quickly bring us. Paul, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Martina. And a huge thanks to our two moderators and to our panel and to our opening presenters. I have the somewhat daunting task of trying to summarize some key insights from what has been an extremely rich, almost 3 hours of discussion. I'm conscious it's getting late here in Europe. Never mind how late or early it is for Tim and Jeff. Very much appreciate you eating into your night or morning there. So I will keep this short, and I'm going to highlight a few things that struck me from what we heard here. But I will not be able to cover everything. You are not surprised. We are going to have a summary of this event published, hopefully as early as tomorrow. So do look out for that if you want to sort of a quick recap. And if you really want to, you can watch back this video, which will also be posted online tomorrow, we hope. So if you can cast your mind back to the opening remarks from Michaela and Toshi, I think they very much framed the discussion and actually nicely teed up some of what followed thereafter. Both of them made actually quite similar points, and Michaela had a really nice 4-point summary at the end of her slide deck that I'm shamelessly going to borrow, and I think Toshi's points really reinforce that. The first point she made was that bioenergy has a key role to play in the energy transition. Secondly, sustainability is key to the successful use of biomass and bioenergy in the system. Thirdly, bioenergy needs to be in the context of the bioeconomy. Bear with me 1 second, I just need to adjust my computer here, something's not quite right. So, there we go. Fourthly, is the important context of the policy and regulatory environment to enable that. And we see some of those points coming back through again as we heard from our subsequent speakers. I'll circle back to those points briefly at the end. So having heard from Michaela and from Toshi, we then dived into our first panel discussion, and we heard some excellent examples that really illustrated some of the challenges of sustainability. Firstly, from Dr. Janssen, I think we heard there what will become, and sounds like it already is, a very valuable resource, trying to understand the value that could be brought from marginal, underutilized, or contaminated land. Fascinating graphic there. I'd love to get into that in a little bit more detail. I think that sort of resource is what we need far more of in order to better understand both the limitations, but also the potential of places to sustainably source our biomass. Dr. Solar had a fascinating case study there of prosopsis and how there was an attempt to turn what is a problem into an asset. That example has all the different facets there in terms of both the potential, but also some of the challenges. And as we often see, some of the challenges are not so much around the technology, but around actually the way in which technology interacts with society and the way in which communities and society in general engage with it. So she highlighted some of the perceptions and concerns and how the news stories turned maybe initially from positive to negative as challenges were encountered. She particularly highlighted that gaps in knowledge there was an issue, and gaps in our understanding, and the work that she was doing is to try and address that. And again, I think that lesson is one that can be applied in a variety of other places where we're looking at biomass. We need knowledge, and we need to communicate that knowledge in ways that allow the wider community to understand the benefits, even whilst we encounter problems. Dr. Grassi had some excellent examples there, sugarcane versus energy cane. She particularly majored on, though, was this point about certification. Michaela touched on that in her opening presentation as well. It's not enough for us to be sustainable. We need to prove that we're being sustainable, and we need to communicate that in a way that is clear. And the RSP certification scheme that she highlighted is a really interesting example. And then Keith had some excellent points to make. I really like the three questions that he highlighted: how to do the right thing, how to build trust, and how to create markets. His point around building trust is it's bottom up, it's slow, it's difficult, but it requires the legwork, if you like, and fascinating examples from his own experience there. And how to create the markets for biomass and bioenergy feedstocks. He particularly emphasizes that good management matters there. So we then got into a fascinating Q&A. I've got pages and pages, so I won't try and summarize all of the key points there. But I think the sort of headline takeaway and some of the points that people made was that a holistic approach to this is essential. By doing so, actually, we can maximize the value from the bioenergy process, and often there are spillover benefits and wider values that can be extracted from that. And secondly, that perceptions and community engagement really matter. So the danger was at the end of that first panel was that we might be feeling slightly down. There's some significant challenges there, concerns about perceptions, at least, of sustainability, etc. However, I think our second panel did exactly what Innovation Week is trying to do. So Innovation Week is all about showcasing those solutions from around the world that are actively helping people. Not just ideas, but things that people are actually doing that can show what is possible. And our panel in the second session really ably demonstrated that. We've heard from them not so long ago now, so I won't spend so much time recapping what they said. But again, some core concepts came out there. So Henrik from Sodra, it was all about partnerships. It was about bringing together this group of forestry management, taking a holistic approach to managing the forestry resources. Timothy then, with excellent examples in Malaysia, not just of the biorefinery concept, but taking that larger, this sort of biohub concept, distributed with multiple partners, multiple value streams created. I think that's an extremely encouraging approach, and I think there's a lot that we can learn from that that could be applied in other contexts. Jeff, some really fascinating innovations there, some really exciting innovations. So these next generation biocatalysts are appropriate for second gen fuels, but in particular the use of lignin as a metallurgical coal replacement. Two really nice examples there of taking quite well established knowledge, talked about 20 years of experience there, and applying it in a new context. And that's exactly the sort of innovation that we're keen to encourage. And then Jim, of course, talking about the very substantial USDOE program, particularly highlighting, very useful to understand the complexities of the different feedstocks, the pathways and uses. Baduraj brought it very nicely full circle at the end there to talk about those sustainability points. So we started with the sustainability points, we saw some excellent examples taking that into account, and then we circled back to it. So, I mean, Henrik's points, we plant more trees than we harvest. Basic but clear. Tim's point about data and info needed to monitor and timely information needed to monitor, and the importance that Jeff highlighted there of the big picture. We can focus a lot on the sustainabilities, but if our forests are burning down, then that is the issue that is going to most impact us. So really just by way of conclusion, 1 minute and I'm done. So I'd like to bring it back to actually to work that IRENA has done and our Reaching Zero Renewables report, which is a sort of foundation for this discussion. That report is very much driven by the increasing attention that governments are placing on the 1.5 degree climate change goal. And if we're serious about achieving 1.5 degrees, we need to eliminate emissions from all sectors of society. It's not enough to just bring them down, we've got to eliminate them completely in the next 40 years or so. And if we're serious about that, then bioenergy and the use of biomass is not an option. Now, a lot of the speakers highlighted that there is some concerns about sustainability, understandable concerns that need to be addressed. But often the response is, well, you shouldn't be doing that then. And that's not the answer. It can't be framed as an argument to stop. It can be framed as an argument to tackle it in a slightly different way. And we've got some great examples of how people are successfully doing that. The key point that I think comes from our report is that eliminating emissions, particularly in these sectors of industry and transport, is really, really hard. People point at other solutions, and those other solutions potentially have a role, will have a role to play. However, no one solution alone is going to be enough. We need bioenergy, the use of biomass for feedstocks, biofuels, particularly in transport context, alongside hydrogen and e-fuels and potentially the use of carbon capture and so on. We need all of the above if we're going to have a hope in heck of hitting that 1.5 degree target. So it's all about that big picture. Finally, 4 points in conclusion. So I think what we can take away is bioenergy, we need it. If we're serious about tackling climate change, we can produce it sustainably. There are lots of examples of doing so. The key thing is to do it with care and attention. There are wider benefits of an appropriate use of biomass for societal and economic if we take that holistic approach to a bioeconomy. And there are lots of exciting solutions that are emerging that some of our speakers here today highlighted. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope you found the session engaging. I'll hand back to Martina, and do watch out for more on this subject from us and our partners. Let me add one final point. It's a real pleasure that we were able to partner with GBEP and Michaela on the organization of this session. So our thanks to them for a really productive partnership in bringing together the panels that you heard today. Thank you. Back to you, Martina.
Thank you, Paul, for a great wrap up on the progress made, on positive messages and what lies ahead of us. And I want to join Paul to thank Michaela and the team at GBEP for co-organizing this session with us, and we look forward to collaborating with you in the future. And again, thanks to all the distinguished speakers for fantastic discussions. And allow me to make a very quick final announcement. If you enjoyed today's discussion, then let me invite you to join our next sessions this week. So each day 2 sessions. So we have 2 sessions tomorrow, 2 sessions on Thursday, and we will move from supply side to how all these energy carriers will be used in industry and transport. So there is still time to register. Please go to our innovation team, IRENA.org website for the registration link. And that concludes it from me. Once again, thank you for joining us and see you in one of our next sessions.
Thank you. Bye-bye.